Shannon.
Every single day, Bill Shorten makes another unfunded spending promise, which he will not be able to deliver because he doesn't know how to pay for it. He makes fun about the fact that he just puts it onto his spendometer. Well, unfunded spending promises put onto Bill's spendometer mean higher taxes or higher debt, which leads to fewer jobs and less growth. Bill Shorten needs to start to explain how he is going to pay for his $66 billion budget black hole, how he is going to make up that gap, given that unless he does so, Labor will not be able to deliver any of the spending promises that they're making in this campaign. The coalition, in contrast, has a national economic plan for jobs and growth, and we have a plan which is fully funded within our budget, a budget which of course was given the tick of approval independently by the Secretaries of Treasury and Finance. Happy to take questions.
Is it true, Finance Minister, as you just said on radio, that you costed a statement of Tanya Plibersek's given in a radio interview on restoring the foreign aid budget, something which isn't actually Labor's policy proposal?
Well, what we've costed is the impact on the budget bottom line from various savings measures that we have implemented, including the one that you mentioned. And if you look at what Tanya Plibersek has said on the record in the past, she has clearly committed a future Labor government to restoring the foreign aid funding to the level that it was before, not to continue.
Isn't that an aspiration rather than a concrete policy proposal?
If you look at Tanya Plibersek's quote in that radio interview, it was very precise and it came with a price tag of just under $20 billion over the current forward estimates. Now, Labor can clarify these things. Because at the moment, Labor is trying to have it both ways. They're trying to make people believe that they're committed to returning to foreign aid funding of 0.5% of gross of national income. They have, in various interviews, perhaps when they thought nobody was watching, made commitments that they would not continue with the savings that we've made in this space, but they don't want it to be accounted against their budget bottom line. But let's leave that one to one side. Even just looking at the cost of the measures that Labor has opposed and has said they would oppose, even just looking at the cost to the budget bottom line of the savings measures the government has put forward, where Labor says they're opposed and will continue to oppose them, they are behind. The cost of those measures to the budget bottom line is about $18.1 billion over the forward estimates, and that grows over the decade. When you look at the budget improvement measures from Labor, there's only $14 billion worth of higher taxes over the forward estimates, and there's about $2.3 billion worth of savings over the forward estimates. That means that even just in terms of the cost of the government's savings measures that Labor are opposing and have said they will continue to oppose, they're already behind. And then you have on top of that $30 billion worth of promises that Labor has made so far. They are their own numbers, which every single one of those promises is unfunded.
If I could pick that issue up from the side where you just left it, isn't it reasonable on the basis of costing people's statements that aren't backed up by policy proposals to then add the cost of unfreezing the Medicare rebate, because that's something Susan Lee says she'd like to do?
Well, the government's policy position is reflected in the budget, and of course, when we increase funding for state hospitals by $2.9 billion, when we have over the last 12 months, as we have increased funding for more affordable access to cancer treatments through the pharmaceutical benefit schemes to the tune of about $3 billion, we have paid for that by savings in other parts of the budget.
And Labor's policy positions on restoring foreign aid cuts reflected in what it says in its policy positions rather than a potential statement, which is exactly like Susan Lee's.
No, that is actually not right. And I mean, the category of savings that I just talked about, and foreign aid doesn't come into that category. There are savings and revenue measures which the government has put forward into the Parliament, which Labor has opposed. There are budget measures which the government has said we will put to the Parliament, which Labor says they will oppose. Black and white oppose. The cost of just those measures to the budget bottom line, where Labor is about $18.1 billion behind, is higher than the additional revenue they would raise or the savings they would make from what they have announced so far. What you're talking about is a totally separate category of additional spending commitments. And then you've got to look at the cost of the promises that Labor has made so far themselves, like actual firm promises. It's about $30 billion over the current forward estimates, which comes on top of the $18 billion cost from not supporting some of the government's revenue and savings measures. They've got a massive multi-billion-dollar budget black hole, and Labor will have to start to explain how they propose to pay for their unfunded spending promises. Because people across Australia need to understand that any unfunded spending promise either will not be able to be delivered or will lead to higher taxes or higher debt, which will hurt jobs and growth.
So of that $66 billion, how much of that is Labor's actual policy and how much is a cost that you've attached to aspirational statements like that one about foreign aid?
Well, I've just explained it to you. So there's $18.1 billion, which fairly squarely is the cost of measures that Labor is opposing, cost of government measures which Labor is opposing or has said they will oppose, where we need to pass legislation through the Parliament. There's about $30 billion, a bit more than $30 billion, which is the cost of promises that Labor has made, which is, these are their own numbers. And then there is about around about $35 billion worth of savings that we have banked, where Labor in one way or another has said we must restore that spending. Now, if Tanya Plibersek wants to come out today and say, no, they're no longer committed to restoring the funding cuts or the savings that we've put in place, that's fine. We'll adjust the numbers. But the people across Australia deserve clarity. They deserve to know what the numbers actually are. I mean, Labor has been ducking and weaving. Labor has been trying to fudge the numbers by interchangeably using 10-year projections and 4-year costings. Labor needs to come clean what the cost of their promises is over the 4-year estimates period and how they're going to pay for their currently unfunded spending promises.
On that point, both the government and Labor have more and more been using 10-year figures to show either a black hole is bigger or a spending promise looks larger. In economic terms, is a 10-year figure actually believable, or is there actually a reason that government's only forecasting budgets over 4 years?
Well, the government's numbers are actually there for all to see over a 4-year period. We delivered a budget a few weeks ago which shows all of the costs of all of the measures, and it shows our budget bottom line over the 4-year forward estimates period, and it also shows that we are expected to return to balance on the same timetable as in the budget update before Christmas. And further, what it shows is that the projections over the medium term to 26-27 are that we are projected to remain in surplus all the way through from 2021 to 26-27. Now, obviously there is more certainty in relation to 4-year numbers. That is why we have the 4-year numbers of our measures, the 4-year costs of our measures reflected in our budget papers. And those budget papers have been ticked off, of course. The integrity of our budget numbers has been ticked off in the pre-election economic and fiscal outlook by the Secretaries of Treasury and Finance. What we're saying is that it is incumbent on Labor to explain how they will pay for their unfunded spending promises. A flippant remark by Bill Shorten that he's just going to put it on his spendometer is not good enough.
You say your forecasts were ticked off by Treasury and Finance in that same document, the pre-election economic and fiscal outlook. The Secretaries of Treasury and Finance issued a pretty stern warning to both major parties in politics that in order to return to surplus, I think 1% of GDP, is going to require more heavy lifting on spending or tax increases. Are you prepared to do more heavy lifting on cutting spending and in fact take more drastic action to get back to that surplus of 1% of GDP?
Well, and the bit that you're missing there, or stronger growth. And of course, everything that we are doing with our National Economic Plan for Jobs and Growth is to strengthen growth, create more jobs. I mean, that is why. Well, but again, this is why you're quite right. The Australian economy is an economy in transition. You're quite right. The global economy continues to be under pressure. We continue to face global economic headwinds, which is why it is so important that we implement our National Economic Plan for Jobs and Growth. That is why it is so important that we implement our innovation and science program, supporting supporting startup businesses. That is why it's so important that we implement our defence industry plan, supporting local high-end manufacturing. That is why it is so important that we keep rolling out those export trade deals, helping our exporting businesses be more successful in other parts of the world. That is why it is so important that we deliver a more competitive enterprise tax rate, something that Labor says they oppose. That is why it is so important that all of our funding commitments in health and education and for roads are guaranteed within our budget. And when it comes to expenditure control, we have made significant progress over the last 2.5 years. Yes, there is more work to be done, but an important part of that equation is stronger growth. And if you look at spending as a share of the economy, it was on track to go to 26.5% by 23-24 when we came into government, and rising beyond that. We've been able to stop that rise at 25.8% and are now projected to bring that down to 25.2% as a share of GDP. And you know, we will continue to work to ensure that the budget is on a sustainable foundation for the future. The point here is we are now on the right track. We have a plan to keep economic growth going, to keep generating more jobs, and to keep putting the budget on a sustainable foundation for the future. This is not the time to take risks. This is not the time to go for the political instability that would come with Bill Shorten going into government with the Greens. This is not the time to go for a Labor Party which doesn't have a plan for the economy, which just has a plan for higher taxes, more spending, which would hurt jobs and growth.
Is the 10-year plan just an aspiration then? If you're saying that 4 years is more predictable than 10, obviously. So your promise of a 25% company tax rate in 10 years' time, how can you guarantee that?
Well, it is reflected in our numbers.
Isn't it just an aspiration?
Well, again, it is reflected in our budget bottom line. It's not only reflected in our budget, it is also reflected in the bottom line in the pre-election economic and fiscal outlook over a 10-year period. So the cost of our enterprise tax cuts is reflected in the numbers, in the budget bottom line numbers to 26-27. And let me just remind everyone why a more competitive enterprise tax rate is so important. It will help us boost investment, it will help us boost productivity, it will help us boost growth, and it will help us increase real wages and living standards over time. Don't take my word for it. I mean, that is what Chris Bowen used to believe. I mean, he wrote about it in his book. And none other than Dr. Ken Henry, the former Treasury Secretary at the Labor Party Tax Forum in October 2011, said that the principal beneficiary of a tax cut, a company tax cut, would be workers. That is why we're putting it forward as part of our National Economic Plan for Jobs and Growth.
I'm not denying that, I agree with you.
Thank you.
What I'm asking you is how can you guarantee in 10 years' time the company tax rate will be 25%? You can't.
Well, that is obviously, the costings in our budget are based on that plan. The costings in our budget to 26-27, including over the medium term, are based on our commitment to bring the enterprise tax rate to 25% within the decade. And everyone can see that in the pre-election economic and fiscal outlook, as well as in our budget, what it shows is that we're projected to get back into balance by 2021, and we're projected to remain in surplus all the way through over the medium term.
Can I ask you on another issue? The government instructs the ATO to review the Canberra housing politician tax deduction?
No, we welcome the review, but these matters are of course appropriately handled independently by the Tax Commissioner. We welcome the fact that he is conducting this review, and we also welcome the fact that he has made some very important clarifying statements, including that the tax treatment of travel-related work expenses for members of Parliament is the same as for any other taxpayer, and he's also of course confirmed that, contrary to erroneous reporting in the last few days, that there is no double dipping by politicians.
So this is an ATO decision independently, had nothing to do with government?
The Tax Commissioner decided to conduct this review, and we welcome it. Thank you.